Coming up.
Waka, in opposition to Chanel's motion for a permanent injunction, has attempted to introduce new evidence to argue that Chanel has unclean hands for purported misconduct during this litigation. They're controlling they want to control what you're going to post, basically, on your own private freaking social media account with the product that you bought. Well, no, you can't. They don't want you to. You peasant. How dare you post anything about Chanel? Look at you. That's the attitude I'm sensing here. It's just my opinion. So basically now, Chanel wants to also control if you are a pre-loved store. Now they're trying to control how much Chanel pre-loved goods you're allowed to sell. Isn't that interesting? They're not saying this in their lawsuit. But if we read between the lines, for me, it seems like that's the direction it's going towards. It's insane. If so many of these cases become set as precedent, if the brands win, then one day we might get to that point. One day you might just get to that point where you indeed no longer own the piece you just purchased. And if this keeps going deeper and deeper and it becomes worse and worse and worse, you know, a law can be changed. And before you know it, and just like that, a law can be changed to, let's say, if you buy a bag from Chanel, you are only allowed to own it for 1 year, and then you have to give it back to Chanel. In other words, you're paying for renting it. Hi everybody, Dacob here. Welcome back to the Fashion Bunker. So, Chanel lawsuit with Waka, what goes around comes around, so lovingly called Waka, goes into round 2. Believe it or not, just now, around about mid-July, Chanel, in the middle of summer in New York with the heat, nobody can barely breathe. And here we go with the lawyers, the Chanel lawyers, the Waka lawyers, they're all going to court to talk to the judge. In this heat, you got nothing better to do. Well, I guess when money is an issue, Chanel, you're really pushing it. Which makes me wonder, do you need it that bad, Chanel? Is there trouble in paradise between Leaner and Bruno? Allegedly. Well, everything I say in this video is for entertainment purposes only, not rooted in truths or facts. Everything's alleged and just my opinion. Period. But also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Push the join button next to the subscription button. Become a member today. Gain access to extra perks. You can also join me on Patreon, superdacob, all spelled together as well for extra perks. This video is being filmed live in front of a live virtual audience. I live stream several times a week. Come join the fun. Come join the chats. So, last February, Chanel won the lawsuit against What Goes Around Comes Around. And it was a jury trial in New York. So the jury decided that Chanel was in the right when it claimed many things, but amongst the many things, it claimed that What Goes Around Comes Around, which is basically like a secondhand pre-loved store that sells a lot of different luxury and maybe non-luxury brands, including Chanel. Chanel claimed that What Goes Around Comes Around is kind of basically, and I'm summarizing it for us. I'm not using the correct phrasing that they used in the lawsuit, so bear with me. But they were basically saying, hey, What Goes Around Comes Around is kind of acting as if they were Chanel, making their customers believe that they are somehow affiliated with us or that we are supporting them in some way. They're also making their customers feel like the used bags or products from Chanel that they are selling, that they have been authenticated by Chanel. They're also using our hashtag to sell Chanel products, which goes against certain laws. I'm like, oh, how interesting. Here we go with Chanel and their hashtag again. Isn't that interesting how Instagram takes down many people's posts when they post a photo of their own product that they bought at Chanel and they just want to share with the world how happy they are to have purchased said product from Chanel. And then they hashtag Chanel. And then Instagram takes down your post and says, your photo has been taken down for copyright infringement because you're using a third-party copyright. Doesn't belong to you for like sales of goods you're not allowed to sell or whatever their reasoning is. I'm like, what the heck? Oh, yeah. even though you're not selling anything. Oh, Chanel is ruthless when it comes to that, allegedly. So, and the jury kind of, oh, and then Chanel was asking the judge to kind of prevent and stop Waka from, well, they can't say, we want to stop you from selling totally pre-loved Chanel goods, because they can't really do that. But they were trying to find a loophole to prevent them from selling Chanel goods by like saying, hey, Mr. Judge, can you please prevent them from using our hashtag, from using our name, which is copywritten? So basically, how is Waka supposed to sell pre-loved Chanel items if they're not allowed to promote them? You see? That's the loophole that I think they're using. But so the jury gave Chanel the win last February. Now, in July, they're meeting up to talk about what does Waka have to give Chanel as a compensation for damages. Interesting, isn't it? So, but Chanel is basically asking for hundreds of millions of dollars, you guys. This is insane. And Chanel is saying, like, the damages are huge, and we want to ask the judge to pour all of the proceeds of everything that Waka has earned through sales of Chanel items. Mind you, some of these items are, okay, imagine you owning a Chanel piece and you don't want it anymore. So you go to What Goes Around Comes Around, and you tell them, hey, can I sell you the bag or commission it to you? You sell it, and then I get, part of the proceeds or whatever. And then Waka says, yeah, sure, we can sell the bag for you. Now Chanel claims that they want all of the money that What Goes Around Comes Around earned from the sale of Chanel products. Now, I don't know if this then extends to whatever money they were owed to give to the private citizens who came to Waka to sell to Waka or through Waka their Chanel items. But Chanel wants everything that Waka earned from Chanel. That's a lot, in my opinion. That's a lot. 2023 amounts to $34,177,688, which would be added to an enhanced profits award. I mean, this is insane. As for what the amount is, it is likely to be steep. Chanel states in its filing that the opportunity cost alone is upwards of $34 million, with the company asserting that its damages expert Dr. Andrew Safir, will testify during the second stage of the trial that the opportunity cost at a rate of 9% annually from 2014 to November of 2023 amounts to $34,177,688, which would be added to any enhanced profits award. In an earlier round, Safir stated in a declaration that it is in his opinion that Chanel has suffered damages of $23.2 million as a result of Waka's acts of trademark infringement, false association, and false advertising. Andrew Safir, Lena Nair. What is that, Lena's cousin? Did she hire her cousin as the expert? Who's the... Well, we'll go here. I don't know. I'm smelling... Is this a family affair? Is this a family affair? Pau says Chanel is losing it. They are unreasonable. Claire Bear says, that's insane. Rhea says, out of mind. Chanel got the money when sold. Thereafter, every owner can do with the bags whatever. Chanel has no rights on it anymore. Well, here's the plot twist, you guys. The second round of the lawsuit will not have a jury. You see, the first part of the lawsuit that ended in February was a jury trial. This one is a bench trial. So there's no jury. Now the judge has to decide how to proceed. And here's another point. On the heels of the party's trial, a New York federal jury sided with Chanel, finding in February that Waka is liable for 1. Willful trademark infringement, false association, and unfair competition based upon its unauthorized use of Chanel's trademarks and other indicia of Chanel. 2, and this is the important point, willful trademark infringement based upon its creation and use of various hashtags containing Chanel or Coco Chanel to advertise and market products on social media. The jury said Chanel is correct in this case, in this point. This sets a precedent. So don't be surprised when Instagram keeps taking down your posts that contain hashtag Chanel if Instagram deems that you're with that post trying to sell a product, even though you're not selling anything, even though you're just enjoying the fact that you bought something special for yourself from Chanel and you want to share with the world how happy you are, still your post might be taken down. And here we have precedent. Here we have precedent. Insane. This is insane. They're controlling they want to control what you're going to post, basically, on your own private freaking social media account with the product that you bought. Well, no, you can't. They don't want you to. You peasant. How dare you post anything about Chanel? Look at you. That's the attitude I'm sensing here. It's just my opinion. Then, point 3, willful trademark infringement based upon its sale and offering for sale of non-genuine Chanel branded products, including A, 13 handbags bearing voided, stolen Chanel serial numbers from Renato Corti, B, 1 handbag bearing Chanel serial number 102-18184, and C, 51 handbags bearing voided Chanel serial numbers. D, 779 Chanel branded point of sale items, and E, materially altered or repaired Chanel branded products. 4, willful trademark infringement based upon its sale of counterfeit Chanel branded products, and 5, and willfully engaging in false advertising. In addition to seeking disgorgement, and disgorgement means basically the flow of all the money that came into Waka has to be then given to Chanel. Lovely word. Almost sounds like relieving oneself, like vomiting, barfing, disgorgement. In addition to seeking disgorgement of Waka's profits, Chanel is also aiming for a permanent injunction to bar Waka from continuing to confuse consumers by way of its use of Chanel trademarks, advertising Chanel products that have not been authorized for sale by Chanel, and offering up Chanel goods that have been materially altered, among other things. Also, interesting point, in the lawsuit that ended, the first part that ended in February, one of the witnesses was an ex-employee of Waka who testified, in favor of Chanel, a witness for the prosecution. This lady, I think it's a lady, testified that, in her opinion, Waka did indeed make many posts on their social media accounts advertising the products that they're selling being Chanel products. So in other words, Chanel was trying to prove that Waka posted too many Chanel products, posted too many pictures of Chanel products, and not enough pictures of other brands. And this is how Chanel managed to convince the jury to vote in their favor in means of, or by stating, hey, if Waka posts too many photos of Chanel products, then the customer might get confused and think that Waka is indeed affiliated with Chanel. So I don't know what sort of percentages they want, that the court would want to see in order to say, well, you can't really claim this, Chanel. I mean, Waka obviously also sells other brands, but apparently they needed to post way more other brands on their social media accounts to balance out the amount of posts that they're making dedicated to Chanel. So basically now Chanel wants to also control, if you are a pre-loved store, now they're trying to control how much Chanel pre-loved goods you're allowed to sell. Isn't that interesting? They're not saying this in their lawsuit, but if we read between the lines, for me, it seems like that's the direction it's going towards. It's insane. I mean, in my opinion, it's insane. And now in the second round, Chanel wants hundreds of millions of dollars. They want to bar Waka from basically selling Chanel, even though they cannot really force them not to sell it at all, but they want to force them from the back to not sell it at all. And now the second part of the trial begins. But the interesting part of all of this is that Wagaca's lawyers are fighting back, stating that Chanel was lying, that Chanel has unclean hands. Isn't that interesting? They're stating that Chanel was trying to kind of alter the numbers a little bit. Plaintiff's clean or unclean hands. Waka, in opposition to Chanel's motion for a permanent injunction, has attempted to introduce new evidence to argue that Chanel has unclean hands for purported misconduct during this litigation. Now, Chanel argues, asserting that there is no evidence whatsoever that Chanel has engaged in any conduct with regard to the rights in suit that would amount to unclean hands, and this factor therefore weighs in favor of disgorgement. With the foregoing in mind, and given Wagaca's continuing willful infringement of the Chanel marks to draw false association with Chanel, even after the jury's verdict, Chanel argues that an award of profits is necessary to deter Wagaca's infringements and unfair competition. It further states that all of the equitable factors and considerations weigh in favor of awarding disgorgement of profits here in an amount to be determined by the court following phase 2 of the trial. So, Waka is claiming Chanel has dirty hands. Chanel is claiming Waka has dirty hands, but in the meanwhile, Chanel wins. Now the judge has to decide how much money Chanel will be awarded. Amy Carmen says the level of corporate greed never fails to astound. Barf emoji. Jedi Monkey says Chanel is being too much. Naked Eyes says Lena's greedy and chip. Hey, they're writing it, I'm reading it. Don't shoot the messenger. Yvonne Burns says, then does that mean if you buy a Chanel whatever, you don't really own it? So if you find a vendor to sell it, can you also be charged? The way this is going in a near future, that might become the case. If so many of these cases become set as precedent, if the brands win, then one day we might get to that point. One day you might just get to that point where you indeed no longer own the piece you just purchased. And if this keeps going deeper and deeper and it becomes worse and worse and worse, a law can be changed. And before you know it, and just like that, a law can be changed to, let's say, if you buy a bag from Chanel, you are only allowed to own it for 1 year, and then you have to give it back to Chanel. In other words, you're paying for renting it. I mean, doesn't the UK already have that law? The landlord concept, the lord of the land. You know that a lot of people in the UK, when they buy a house, they don't buy the land. They just buy the property on top of the land, and after a certain amount of years, they have to give it back to the landlord, the lord of the land that owns the land on which the building stays. And so it's a law that already exists in some countries. It's just one step to enhance that law over to also movable products. And if the law is voted into effect, then it becomes law. And if it becomes law, then you won't be able, you're going to buy your bag. You're going to have to give it back after a while. And you might not be able to take photos of it either if the law doesn't allow you to. There you go. There you go. Oh, Francesca says, wow, I didn't know that about the UK. Look up what landlord means, and then you'll know. Well, there you go. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you have more intel on this, you can send it over to me on superdacob@gmail.com. And I'm super curious to see how this second part of the trial goes on, as it just began a couple of days ago. Thumb up the video, subscribe if you liked this content, and never give up on love. Bye.